No pressure now. Yeah, exactly. All right, we're live. Hello and welcome to Fermenting Opinions. This is a Fermenting Opinions Hangout. I'm your host, David Poseidon. Co-host James McVeigh is doing laundry. I had to throw him under the bus. Every time he's not here, I have some smart aleck thing I'm going to say about him. And that's just how it's going to go. But tonight is February 28th, 2018, and tonight we've got sort of a couple of main topics that we're going to get into. One, we're revisiting what happened on the 14th of this month with the shooting at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, that left 17 dead. We've seen several kinds of responses to that, from the students all the way up to the president, and a lot of stuff in between. And we're going to get into a couple of those things. And we're also going to talk about something that I just have a personal bone to pick. And hopefully we'll get to that by the end of the Hangout, with regards to a letter that was released by the Tennessee GOP chair. Let's see, what is his name? Scott Golden, that he released about a week ago as an attack ad / press release against Gayle Jordan, who's running for state senate in District 14 here in Tennessee. And I'll get into that sort of at the end if anybody wants to stick with me through that. But first, the shooting. What do we want to talk a little bit about the shooter first? I know, Haley, you did a little bit of research on that. Do we want to start with him just a little bit?
I just found out that he had been diagnosed with autism. He has been diagnosed with autism and ADHD. And also, what I thought was interesting was his parents seemed to be older parents. I know he's adopted, but his dad died in 2004 and was 67. And so how old would this kid have been in 2004? How many years ago is that? 12?
If he's 19 now?
14 years ago?
Yeah.
So
he was a child. He was
5.
Yeah.
And his mom died last year in her 60s. So whenever his dad died, his mom was in her early 50s. So they were just older parents. They had a big age gap, but they were older parents. I don't know what that. Yeah, we could speculate on that.
And I don't know. And he was a yeah. I don't want to get too much into it. And there was something that Melissa and I had talked about previously about responsible coverage of these kinds of. I don't know, it sounds antiseptic, call it a mass casualty event. But when you talk about mass shootings, about like saying things or talking about the shooter in such a way that like glorifies who he is. And I wasn't trying to get into that or make it appear that we're going to sort of, pettifog what's going on with the shooter himself, other than to bring up the fact that there's a good indication there that he was not sort of sound mind. And this is already, do we need to be putting in place something more rigorous in terms of, what should be on a background check that is disqualifying, but that there's actual due process in place to have that there's, come on, lawyers, help me out here with this, that
procedural safeguards,
due diligence,
with regards to, passing scrutiny, essentially, having a law like that in there. Yeah.
Oh, and yeah, well, that's like, is it what type of scrutiny? I get it. That's different.
Yeah.
Right. If it were to be challenged, because anything that gets put forward as a gun control law that people will immediately fight back, my rights shall not be infringed. Right. And they quote that part of the Second Amendment. And so any legislation, anything.
Well, I think that the sort of like rebuttal to that would be to say that, yeah, but when you're the government, you have the right to impose reasonable restrictions on people's behavior for the safety of others. And I think that it's the police power, if you will, of the government. You have to balance, I think, the right of the individual to bear arms with the right or the duty that's placed on the government to protect its citizenry and the rights that it has under the law in achieving that goal.
You cut out there on me at that last little bit, so I'm not sure what you said.
I said that you have to balance the rights of the individuals to be able to possess and enjoy weapons, while at the same time, you have to balance that, I think, against the right of the duty that's placed on the government to try to protect its citizens. And so it's got its own rights and and whenever it sets out to accomplish its, duties that it has placed on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I guess, and I was also thinking
police
about
power.
Right. Something about like strict scrutiny that like has to be narrowly tailored and has to serve a
constitutional muster.
The government like significant state interest or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's whenever you're discriminating against a protected class, right?
Gotcha.
So I think that's whenever you're trying to like pass a law that is like arguably racist or sexist.
Isn't it the intrusive means thing?
Yeah, I'm not I in no way pretend to be a constitutional like lawyer at all.
Yeah.
But I think that's what the scrutinies have to do with, is whenever there's a law passed by the government.
Gotcha. So that doesn't necessarily interact with what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Wait, I just had the phrase and I threw it out there. Did any of y'all hear it? Because I forgot it immediately. It's
interest.
Yeah. You don't. The least intrusive means. It's intrusive means. So it's. What are the means by which you are going to accomplish it? It doesn't have to be the least intrusive means available, but there can't be a lesser intrusive means out there to accomplish the same thing. Something like that.
Gotcha.
You have a way better attention than me.
And so I guess I'm thinking about this in the same way that, we have laws against, making threats against a head of state or, yelling bomb on an airplane or something like that. And you say, well, that's you're infringing on my, my First Amendment free speech rights. It's like, well, no, there's due process in place there that we can impose reasonable restrictions, because there's a state interest there. And that's sort of where I was going at with it. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night, so you can tell I'm on top of my game necessarily with the lawyer stuff. But
and you're with people who just don't not that we don't care that much, but it just wasn't super interesting.
I'm just imagining the pushback, you know what I mean? Well, see that's what kills me, because all I would want to study would be constitutional law. Like that, to me, that's where it's all at. But it's not all that practical, and there's not that many jobs available. I get all that. I understand it all. But also why I didn't go to law school. That, and it's too expensive. But anyway, neither here nor there. Do we want to segue at this point to?
Well, can I just say one thing real quick? Because you had mentioned something that made me, I was literally just thinking about when I was thinking about what we were going to be talking about on this podcast. I just thought, I look at the whole gun thing about the way that you would regulate any type of anything that could be super harmful to others. And so you can't just, I don't think people can people just own a grenade? Seriously.
It depends on who you ask. It depends entirely on who you ask.
You know what, though? I think I can say something about
you can't legally own a grenade in Louisiana. I know that.
Is that counted as firing a gun? I don't know.
There's something that I was reading about, and I could just butcher this, but there's some kind of statute where relics of historical significance can be collected, like cannons and grenades,
right? But
there have to
militarized,
be
They're duds.
Yeah, I would love to own an A-10 Warhog, sometime. But guess what? They're gonna take off the big cannon in the front of it. Okay, if I was to purchase something like that,
I've got some friends here. I've got some friends here in Tennessee that every New Year's Eve they have a party outside of Murfreesboro, and they fire that cannon. I mean, they're not putting live rounds, not putting cannonballs in it, but they're firing off live rounds. I've got a pin that I pulled to fire the cannon. I mean, so they are still functional.
I don't know. I don't know where the law falls with that, honestly.
But it is a Confederate cannon. He does have the permission of the state to own and to use it. And he also, maybe it's because he's involved in, reenactments and things of that nature.
There may be some kind of special license or something with regards to, just like you can get a class 3 and you can own, the fully automatic weapons and stuff like that. Like there are provisions there where you have to jump through.
There are provisions. Yeah.
But normatively, people don't get to just have cannons. That's not a thing. Which I think is a good thing.
Wait, but what was? Sorry. What was the point? Like, what was the question to do with grenades, though? I was like,
because I'm just trying to. Thank you, Haley, because that's exactly what I was just trying to finish. Is just to say, because if you can't own a grenade, the reason's probably because it's dangerous, and I feel like when in the wrong hands, right? Because anyone can be careful with a grenade, right? Like you just have to keep it shut, or use it as you should, go somewhere where it's safe. But why is the real reason that they're not allowed? Probably because they can do a lot of bodily harm if used inappropriately. And I feel like maybe we should kind of think that way. I mean, I understand a bomb's not this. I mean, I get it. In Louisiana, using dynamite, I think is deemed a, automatic, if anything goes wrong, you're strictly liable for it because it's so dangerous. I think if you're going to have an AR-15, then make it strictly liable if anything goes wrong about it. Do it in Europe, where if something goes wrong with your gun, then
I mean, it's my understanding that it's already sort of a law that if you own a firearm, if it's registered in your name, you are responsible for both the gun and the bullet that comes out of it, no matter who might have grabbed hold of it. Yeah.
No.
I mean, that's in Tennessee.
Really?
That's what I was taught. Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was taught in Tennessee when I went to my CC.
I don't know. Interesting.
If we just ground to a halt on that one, I don't know what else to tell you.
I just haven't. I feel like I would have heard about that. I'm not saying I'm wrong, but I feel like I would have heard about that just because that's one of my issues is the inability to sort of, there isn't the risk of liability for personal injuries, wrongful deaths in the arena of firearms. You can't sue the makers of the product, the sellers of the product. The shooter is in jail and probably judgment proof if they did use a stolen gun. There is very limited liability, and so I don't know.
Well, I think that's why. If someone steals your gun, I mean it's on you to report it as soon as possible, right? I mean, I guess you can maybe still get out of it if you didn't report it.
I guess maybe there's a fine if your gun is used in a crime. But I don't know. I doubt it's serious.
But I mean, just in general terms, if you hand your pistol to somebody else and they are shooting it recklessly and somebody gets shot, you're going to be found liable for that too. That's going to fall on you as well. And I mean, I can't imagine that would necessarily be different with an AR. But that could be tightened up.
So I work in energy companies, and these products, their end result, they're not, super dangerous. Some of them are. Electricity is always dangerous, and there's a lot of regulations and stuff that they have to follow to have big electricity plants and put all those power lines everywhere, and they have to follow real strict rules to make sure that they're not dangerous. Really strict inspection protocols, because if they don't do it, they'll get sued a lot. Same thing with oil and gas. They're at refineries where they have to use benzene to make products, and there's benzene clouds they have to make sure that people are away from during certain times. And they have to make sure that their vents work right in this intricated big old piece of metal that looks cool when you drive by really late at night. There could be a valve in there that fucks something up. So there's a lot of strict protocol. They're constantly in this thing called turnaround, and it's just to constantly keep a check on literally every bolt that's in the thing. So.
Sure, and it's not unlike aerospace either, where the thing's checked and rechecked, and if you signed that log and you said it was okay, and something goes down, it is your ass completely and entirely.
But I mean, we're willing to deal with those kinds of dangers for those kinds of products because they're really useful to us. And the dangers that are associated with guns, I just don't know if their usefulness to individual gun owners, since not everyone benefits, from feeling
but it's not about but the argument is and I'm just trying to play devil's advocate a little bit here, is it's not about whether or not it's useful. It's about, to them, it's about whether or not they have a constitutional right to it, and that's where it's going to begin and end, essentially.
Well, I mean, I have
This is my right. You know.
I mean, you know, we have a right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You know, right to feel like the liberty to walk around and not be harassed with guns.
and they would, and I really wish one of them was here. And I'm just sort of regurgitating, and I know it's frustrating, and I'm sorry, but like they might argue that you actually don't, like you're not guaranteed those things.
Wait, guaranteed what?
Basically, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Like it's not a guarantee. Like
it's in the preamble of the Constitution, though.
Oh, I thought that was Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, it's a declaration.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And the Declaration of Independence codifies no laws, you know. But this is getting a little off topic. Again, if anybody watching this now or later knows some really staunch Second Amendment, proponents who wants to come on at some point and tell us why we're all wrong, I would be open to that.
I know, yeah.
But let's move on a little bit. I want to get to what Donald Trump said, because, oh boy. Let me bring it up. There was a Hill article that I just saw right before we came on, and this came out a couple hours ago. Trump said, "Take the guns first, and then go through due process second." That's. And I listened to the video where he said it. It's not out of context. Mike Pence was talking about putting in due process first to then judge someone as mentally unfit, what have you, and then go and confiscate the guns via due process. I don't like agreeing with Pence on anything, but that doesn't sound like a horrible way of going about it. And Trump says, "Well, no, let's not get caught up in the courts first. Let's just go take the guns, and then we'll, a la, Senator Palpatine, we'll make it legal afterwards." Like, and I was like, and you don't, and it's the horrible liberal in me wants to just be like, weren't you guys afraid Hillary was going to come take your guns? Weren't you guys afraid Obama? Like it's. And I don't want to be that petty, but it's there. It's in my mind. I'm thinking it. We're all thinking it. And I'm just like, how can Trump? You can't do that. I mean, you have to have.
Well, y'all seem to be forgetting that Trump was a Democrat most of his life. Remember?
He was. Yeah, he was.
He was really pro-choice.
He was pro-choice.
Yeah. And this would be the. I mean, really, if you can take anything from this on a high level, this would just be QED that he doesn't really hold positions so much. He's going to say whatever he finds to be expedient in the moment. He will almost certainly backtrack on this or contradict himself at some point if he hasn't done it already by the time we've gone on air here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just Trump just talking. And
well, he already backtracked on the he already backtracked on the increasing the age requirement.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah. God, and that NRA lady.
But he already backtracked? Haley, he backtracked
on the 21 years old thing.
He did? When?
Shortly after that NRA lady gave the speech.
Dana Loesch?
That said the media loves mass shootings with white mamas crying.
Yeah, I saw that. That was atrocious. She it was. What the most disgusting part of that was to me was that she had just been at the CNN town hall and answered Mrs. Gonzalez's questions for however long it was, and acted like she had true empathy. Like, I know what you're going through. Like, she had so many talking points to sound like very sweet and not aggressive. And then the next day she goes on that and she starts just like talking shit about those kids. And it was so hurtful to me because it's like, if I was one of those kids, I would be sitting at my house at home in Florida being like, whoa,
what happened?
Just acted like she cared about me. And clearly that's not the case.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, shortly after that speech, there was some backtracking on the age thing.
Yeah.
But that's on the part of Trump, right?
and after that speech was whenever Trump did that sit down with the victims, family members of the victims, and asked, who
the
thinks
listening
it's a
session.
really good idea to arm teachers, and like 2 people raised their hand out of a group of like maybe like 50 to 60 people, and he's like, who has strong feelings against it? But he like kept the 2 people who had their hands up. He was like, oh, we got some people who are really like that idea. And he's like, who's strongly, all right, I get it, and
Oh my gosh.
and like he like tried to get it to hurry it pan away from all the hands.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, because it's good for the NRA if they get to arm, you know, like 20% of the teaching population is, you know, probably 1 million people.
Yeah, I saw some numbers on that. It is like a million or more. Like I mean, we can go off on that tangent just briefly, I guess. But like, I guess the way I look at it is something needs to be done. Is it banning assault rifles? And yes, for all the gun pedants who are hearing that term and losing their minds, I don't care. I don't care what I don't care. I'm not going to be derailed by that conversation, because I just don't give a shit what you call it. You can call it Susan if it makes you happy. You know what we're talking about. And yes, I'm quoting, what was that, Snatch? But so either we do something about that, or we have increased security at the schools. I don't think arming teachers is an intelligent measure at all, because they're already busy being teachers 100% of their time, 150% of their time. And we don't have the resources really, you know, and you've seen the memes and stuff like that. And it's absolutely true, both in the private and public sector, that they don't have money for, you know, for books and for fixing the leaky roofs or classrooms that are big enough. Like, and all of a sudden we're going to have all this money for training and equipment and ammunition. Like, we suddenly have all this money. Like, I think honestly, like, we do have this money. We just want to spend it on public education.
I mean, I think what we learned in Parkland is that there were armed personnel at the school.
Yeah, and that was part of it too, wasn't it? That there were some armed personnel. There was one guy who didn't go in.
There was like apparently at least 3 other armed people working, armed personnel at the school at the time of the shooting. So, you know, this logic of, well, we need to make sure that all the schools, you know, have some people armed at them so they can, you know, handle this. It's like, well, at this school, we had some people that were armed.
Yeah,
and,
it's true.
You know, I think that you got to realize that those are very, you know, very, very dangerous weapons are very, very dangerous people have very easy access to very dangerous weapons. And so even if you are trained with your handgun, you know, I mean.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like, you know, what weapons are we bringing into the classrooms? What weapons are we bringing into the school that's going to counter weapons like the AR-15? And I know there's other guns that can do the same job. You know, I get that. But anything like that you come in with essentially overwhelming firepower, you know, what is in the school or around the school that will defend against that? That's another question. And really, most of this comes back to me for the super staunch, don't take my guns. It's, you know, it's my AR-15. I won't back off. It's, you know, complete, you know, Second Amendment absolutist, that they won't budge on restricting any firearms. I expect those people to be willing to pony up and pay for the right kind of security, whatever level that hits, to reduce the likelihood of things like this happening in the future. And that's another thing too, is like, there's not just like the bump stocks or an assault rifle ban or any one particular piece of legislation is going to stop the next mass shooting, right? We already know it's going to happen. We're going to have another one. We're going to have another one at the school. It's inevitable. And one of those kids, you know, the kids were, you know, chanting like, you know, sort of like this never again or not one more, whatever the hashtag happened to be. But like, there's going to be another one. You know, I'm almost surprised we haven't seen it already. There's going to be another one.
There was one that was stopped in Vermont.
Oh, wow.
And they already like started passing legislation. The thing is, they're doing it. So I said very dangerous people have very easy access to very dangerous weapons.
Sure.
And I think we all just talk about like the very dangerous weapons part, but I think we missed the first 2 steps, like the ease of access. Very dangerous people and ease of access. And so, yeah, and this right after the Parkland shooting happened, it's been in the news. It was on NPR this morning. There was a guy who told his friend he wanted to do a school shooting, and then he was texting with her, and so then she ratted on him, and he was brought to jail, and all of his guns were confiscated, and he's probably going to be sent to a mental hospital. He didn't do anything, but they had the text messages, and then the governor, like, that day was like, oh my God, Vermont, because Vermont has is really like a liberal hunting area, and so they have like really, really loose gun laws. I think it's like a point of pride, up there. So yeah, they're passing a bunch of stuff like right now.
Well, that's good though. I mean, if you're making those kinds of ideations, like you don't play around with it. It's like when someone's talking about hurting themselves, like you don't play around with it. You don't say, oh, maybe they won't. You call mobile crisis on their ass. Like you do it immediately. You don't think about it. Like that's the first and only reaction you should have as someone who's, not a trained expert in that. I don't see a problem with doing it the same way with someone who is talking about it. But then, is the next shooter just going to be more careful about not talking to people about it beforehand? But there are so many things that you can build on. You can add this piece of legislation there, this piece of legislation here, and you can reduce the number overall. We're not going to stop the next one from happening.
Maybe what we need to do, if I can interject, what I think needs to happen is, and I come from this from a behavioral health care background because, my education is in psychology, and I believe that there are more issues at play beyond the gun. There are behavioral issues. I'm not saying that everybody that has a mental illness has the capability of committing these types of atrocities, but it's a cocktail. There are several different things going on, and maybe we need to be a little bit more encouraging of people who are associated with these people to legitimately listen when they have concerns, because obviously this guy was on the FBI's radar and they chose to do nothing. Maybe we need to be a little bit more mindful of saying, we do believe you when we say, see something, say something. Let's say something so we can do something cautionary, proactively. Maybe if more students say, hey, listen, there's this kid in my school. He doesn't sit right with me. He's been saying some really kind of off kilter comments about, Columbine or copycat of Parkland. I mean, there are things that students hear. I mean, they're not living in a bubble. They know who the troubled fellow youths are in their community. Maybe we need to be a little bit more encouraging of them coming forward and taking them seriously, not just, blowing that shit off. Maybe that's one starting point, because I can't in all good faith say, okay, let's disregard HIPAA and go and look through everybody that's got something on their medical record that indicates that they might be suicidal, sociopathic, antisocial, dissociative identity disorder. I don't want to go down that path and just start saying everybody that has those conditions is in the danger range. But I feel like we do need to be mindful of listening to the young people of today who have a stronger finger on the pulse than we do.
Yeah, I really agree with everything you said there. Yeah.
That also happened in the Parkland case, though.
That's what I said. The FBI is the one that dropped that ball because they were notified of this guy.
The information was passed on to the school in like September of last year. They were like, "Hey, someone has said he wants to do a mass shooting at your school," and it's this. I don't know if they knew who the guy was. I'm unclear on those facts, but the school was aware, which is why I think the school might get sued in this.
Well, that's why I say that we need to be listening more to the students that are reporting this, because they're the ones that have the stronger pulse on the situation than those of us that are not attending that school. And if it is the case that those students reported that to their administration, then yeah, it falls on their shoulders, because they They either didn't believe it or didn't take it seriously or thought that it wasn't going to happen, whatever reason. But I think that we as adults need to be a little bit more trusting of what our children are saying about that,
I think,
you know.
Go ahead. I was going to say that I think in this case, though, like everyone kind of knew this kid was a problem, and that he showed a lot of signs, like police have been called a certain number of times. I don't think that the what was immediately came out in the media about the number of times that like they had been to his house or he had been arrested. I don't think that number was entirely accurate. At least
it's like 45.
What the sheriff had said during the CNN town hall said that it was a little bit skewed from what actually happened, what people had reported initially. But neither here nor there. What he was complaining of is that, you know, they knew he was a problem too, but because of the laws and the way that they are, there was only so much they could do until something else happens. It's like, you know, without something strong, given the current laws, without something stronger, which basically kind of gives the kid license, you know, in a sense that like he'll be able to get away with something once before there's anything that's going to kick in that's going to keep him away from that weapon in the first place. Go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, you know, listening to what you're saying, Devin. Wow, David.
Just call me Bevan.
No, I was just thinking, honestly, no, it's because Bevan's been texting me because he's about to get here. So that's why I'm sorry. So I've made a hybrid. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What's more important is that listening to you speak, it made me think of that. I had this thought that I wanted to express tonight about, I feel like, you know, I kind of feel like society failed this kid, and I know what he did was horrific and he's got serious problems and he's wrong. I think he was smart enough to know wrong from right. I do think that, like what Haley mentioned in the beginning is, you know, that he's got mental problems, and I'm not saying that, you know, we, you know, should not overlook those. And I'm sure that he knew right from wrong, but at the same time, I think society failed this kid. I mean, he's so young, like he's, 19 years old. He's adopted. His, you know, father died when he was young. His mother died.
Hey, there's
recently.
nothing wrong with being adopted.
Nothing. My little brother, you know this. I'm not saying it like that.
I know.
I just mean that. I
mean,
that
he was adopted by geriatric parents.
He was adopted by older parents, like older parents with health issues, and they died. And one of them died really on him when he was really young, and still 67's kind of young to die. So, he had a sickly dad as a young kid that died, and then a sickly mom.
This sounds like a person who had some sort of exceptionalities that should have been and maybe were identified in an early age and was adopted. And I see this a lot in my own profession, adopted by people who are not at all equipped for meeting those needs themselves. And
they were
whatever was going on with him went unchecked.
They were like a very wealthy family, though.
That doesn't mean they're qualified.
I thought I read somewhere that it was his grandparents that adopted him. Was that not accurate?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
I would have to double check on that. Whoever they happen to be, and regardless of how much money they had.
I'm just saying that, you know, I think that if you have a lot of money,
I don't think they were his grandparents.
You might think, I don't think they were his grandparents, but I think that you think if you have a lot of money, you might like be more open to adopting like a child at risk, you know, a child that might have, you know, been born by a mother who drank during her pregnancy. So that's why he might have cognitive disabilities. You think you'll still be able to handle it, you know, if you have enough funds.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I can really speak from a lot of personal experience on this topic. And these people who are adopting, they're coming from a great place. They really are. But a lot of times, you know, and they see somebody who's, you know, otherwise going to probably, you know, fall through the cracks, and they want to adopt them and want to help them. But a lot of times they'll get them and they are just not equipped themselves emotionally, physically sometimes, to be able to actually, you know, essentially serve that kid and serve their needs. And the facility that I work at, we get those kids, and I'm not going to name it by name, but we get those kids, and there's a lot of rich parents who send their kids, you know, to our school, and a lot of those rich parents had adopted, and then they get something that they don't know how to deal with, and so they basically send them away to us. So that happens too. Maybe that should have happened with this kid, and maybe he'd be in a better place, because, you know, a lot of times we end up insulating these young people from the would-be consequences of their actions. And guess what? None of them go anywhere near firearms where I work.
Yeah.
And for very good and obvious reasons, you know.
Can I pose a question?
That was a flashback moment, David.
Yeah, right.
Well, let me ask y'all this. I mean, okay, so I think everyone in America will say that the problem, young people getting murdered in their schools because someone shows up with a gun and starts killing them. Okay? Solution. Go.
Well, I guess that's what I was saying earlier, is that if we are committed to, say, not banning the assault rifle, we have to do a lot of other things, okay? And that's going to require money. So if you really want to, and I think arming the teachers is the dumbest idea in the world, but if you really wanted to arm teachers, you go ahead and pay for it. I want to see that. I want to see somebody pony up.
Maybe if you own a gun, the taxes that you pay to your school district has to increase.
That would be a way of paying for it. Is there a constitutional issue there?
I don't know.
No.
I don't think so. I mean, it's just, you still have the right to, you know, have weapons, but if you are going to be one of those people,
it would have to be a purchase tax.
Yeah.
Wouldn't they have to collect it on the purchase?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
they tax vices, you know,
or consumption.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a sale of goods. You'd add that tax to the sale of goods. Yeah.
That would be one way to help pay for it. I mean, we have, you know, the discretionary spending that we have, you know, access to. Like, if we want to allocate funds for it, we can, but we have to have the will. And I think that's what it's going to come down to, is, do we really have the will to do something? And do we do that? And it's not just that. I think there needs to be better security at schools, because any other gun law that gets passed tomorrow, if you ban all guns tomorrow, guess what? There are still millions upon millions of guns in the U.S., and a lot of those are owned illegally. A lot of those are manufactured or brought in.
And then do due process later.
No one-size-fits-all solution. Yeah. And Lace just got on the Trump train.
Oh.
Just like that. You suddenly become pro-Trump. See how that happened, guys?
Yeah. Can you believe that just happened? I'm gonna have to go throw up a little bit.
You know what? Exactly. I'm proud of you. I'm a little proud of you.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah. I know.
Well, here's the
thing.
thing.
Say I'm one-minded.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Obviously, I think one thing that both sides can agree on is greater and increased and appropriate security at the schools needs to be primary focus. I think that it's absolutely abhorrent that security officer that chose not to go into the school. I think it is entirely unfathomable that the first responders were not the local officers in that area. They were from from another county. I think that's ridiculous. So I think that when you're talking about better measures in protecting the school grounds itself, you know, maybe we need to put up, I know some schools in this country have locked doors so that the only people that can get in have an access, like whether it be a biometric scan, iris, a fingerprint, or they have some kind of pass card. Like, you know, at my office, you have to have, you know, the little you know, card to get in. That should be quick and easy to put in. Secondary measures, maybe including officers that are already on your local government payroll that do kind of an off-on schedule, whatever that schedule would look like, you know, 5 days on, 5 days off, or, you know, want to rotate through the police force. Having someone that's trained in these kind of situations be scheduled to serve at those schools. I mean, I don't know, that might increase, you know, the number of police officers that you need to hire, given how many schools there are in any given county or whatnot. But I think that there needs to be even retired police officers may want to, you know, give some of their time for, you know, a small salary to protect the children. But I think that the first thing is protect the school and let's deal with the adult thing later. You know, do we ban this gun, that gun, whatever, you know, or, you know, let's have the argument on what rights are going to be infringed and, you know, what's going to be the best for all parties concerned. But I think first of all, we need to look at amping up the security in the schools.
Yeah, and again, I don't disagree at all. I mean, I think, you know, whatever else happens, whatever else gets done, we are going to need better security, and that's just the reality. You know, a lot of people, a lot of the big, you know, Second Amendment advocates, they'll talk about like, well, if school's a gun-free zone, then it's a soft target. You can just walk in. Not entirely true in every case. There are SROs.
Jody says that.
Do what?
I was about to say, Jody says that all the time, and you can tell him. I said, "Hey, Jody, we're live. You should come on and talk about this."
There's no way he will come on and talk to us because he is in a competing media whatever.
So I think that schools, you know, yeah, they should be safer, of course. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of schools. One, so I think implementing some sort of like massive, you know, revamp of all American schools is, I think that's a lot of logistics, a lot of work. And I wonder if there's an easier way to have a greater impact and to resolve the problem. And
you gotta mute it. I'm gonna mute her. I don't know if I can mute her from here. I have muted her. I have the power.
I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, with the barking. Were you saying there may be a simpler solution than dealing with the financial nightmare?
And also, you know,
turning our schools into fortresses.
I also think that like the decision to turn your schools into fortresses does need to be done on a state level. I think schools are very much so a state level issue, and so whenever we're talking about resolving problems, I just don't see how we could. For one thing, I see a lot of logistics that have to be handled, and then also getting everyone, all of the states, to, you know, compliance with some federal mandate in, you know, in the field of educating local children. So I don't know. That like it's a good idea in theory, but I see some problems. It's like the same thing with the food box. You know, giving food boxes instead of food stamps. Like, good idea, but I think the logistics would not work. And I think the added issue is that that's a state level controlled. That's state
program. Yeah, how it gets distributed. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of I won't say roadblocks. There's a lot of hurdles, but I don't think, given the consequence of doing nothing. I don't think we have an option really to do nothing anymore, no matter kind of what it costs. And they're both muted right now. So it's you and me, Melissa, right now.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, and I think, you know, I think that, you know, background checks need to be universal. Almost all Americans want that. And it's been expressed to me that, you know, things like gun show loopholes are not as big as you think they are. We can still close them. I think HIPAA laws can be, you know, not annihilated, but I think they can be amended so that this kind of information can be included. You know, whether or not somebody has some kind of, you know, disqualifying diagnosis where, you know, it's just a public safety issue as to whether or not they should have that firearm. And I think that's something that can pass, you know, scrutiny, essentially. Whatever Second Amendment argument is going to be thrown back at that, I think it should be able to surmount. You know, the right to bear arms is not absolute. Constitutional rights are not absolute, and that's how all the other ones work. So I don't see why this one should be different. So let's, if no one else has anything else to add, I think we could talk a little bit more about the town hall. If you guys thought about the kids, does anybody think the kids were like used as puppets kind of thing? Because I've heard that argument as well, that this was a CNN hit piece.
I don't think they were puppets.
I don't think they were puppets.
Okay.
I think that obviously, if you're going to talk about issues that concern the children need to be brought into the communication or into the process, into the conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's, in a way, it's weird. It's weird watching, because a lot of people talk about like how like polished so many of the kids were, and like how good they are at speaking, you know, to crowds like that, or in front of cameras, or in front of a national audience. I mean,
that was like a high achieving school in a really affluent neighborhood. You know, one of the 17 people who was shot was a national merit semifinalist as a sophomore. It's full of smart kids. So
yeah, no, I mean, I'm super proud of them. Like, you know, and as an adult, maybe I'm probably not the only one who feels like a little bit embarrassed. It's like it takes like children to come out and speak up, because as adults, we've been a collection of bumblefucks over this issue, and like we just keep letting it happen again and again and again, and it's almost become routine until they like got up and were like, no, we're not dealing with this anymore. You know, they're doing all their hashtags, and they're speaking, and they're calling bullshit on all of us and on the system that perpetuates this. And I just think it's a magnificent thing. I don't know.
I mean, I'm proud of them. I don't feel like, I mean, they utilized social media immediately. They, you know, they were open to talking about this. I mean, I don't know. I don't think those kids at Sandy Hook, you know, those 6-year-old kids at Sandy Hook had the same capabilities. So.
Yeah, I hear you.
And then the Columbine happened in '99, so it was before, you know, they had the ability to just really start pushing their message to a lot of people fast.
Yeah, and we also have to remember, you know, the other side of this was that, you know, the Pulse nightclub shooting was also in South Florida. It's really not that far from Parkland, as I understand it. And that happened like a year ago. So like, you know, they're veterans of this. Like they didn't just sit in shock, you know, like a lot of us would if this is the first time anything like that happened in your area, because it wasn't. They've seen all this, you know, and it's in that sense is not new for them either.
Well, I also think it's relevant that they're, you know, 17 and 18 years old, and Columbine happened in 1999. So they're downstairs. So I mean, they've never lived in an America that didn't have mass shootings at schools.
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, they've seen their entire life the acceptance. They saw what happened to Sandy Hook. They saw people try to say that Sandy Hook was a hoax. It happened to them. They went to the media. They went to social media, and, you know, they don't.
Can I say
want
something
this to
cynical?
happen.
Can I say something cynical?
Yeah.
So I believe that these kids like truly believe what they're preaching, but I have friends that are in Southern Florida, and I know that they're super, you know, liberal in that area. And so like, I do think that, I mean, I understand when people like their knee-jerk reaction on the right or on the, you know, gun control side or the anti-gun control side are like, well, those kids, you know, were raised in an environment that's like, you know, politicized and liberal and all this shit. Like, okay, yeah, but there's still like, no offense, but those kids were like, had their friends get killed. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, but like, I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I truly do. But at the same time, like, so, I mean, like, those kids got, like, listen to them.
They went through a mass shooting. You didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't, you know? So what if they're 18 and you think that they're stupid little youngsters? They went through a mass shooting and you didn't, you know?
They seem less stupid than a lot of people that I know, you know? A lot of the politicians and pundits and all of us, really. I mean, they seem a lot less stupid in this situation than
Haley,
a lot of us. So.
You said something that kind of, I want to buttress your comment about, you know, they've never grown up. The Columbine happened in 1999. They've never grown up in a world where this hasn't been a thing. And I see a lot of people, actually, honestly, on both sides of the political spectrum, bringing this up for discussion. You know, these guns that we have in 2018 are the same guns that we had in 1998. and earlier than that. What has changed that this has become a thing all of a sudden where, you know, we've got these school shootings? Obviously the guns haven't changed. What's changed? And that's why I brought up the whole issue last week, David, with society. I think that there are a lot of, and another reason why I think there's more than just one. It's not a single issue problem. There are so many things going on that I think addressing one factor is not going to change the situation. There are a lot of things that need to be taken under advisement. I think that, you know, one of the things that, and I kind of want to harp on, I guess, what I said last week. I think that we as adults need to be better adults and show more respect toward each other, teach our children how to be more respectful towards each other and themselves, and maybe spend more time being parents and not plopping them in front of a TV or a video game or letting them use their mobile device ad nauseum. We need to interact as adults with our children to raise better children, to become better adults.
But I mean, it's not just kids that are doing the mass. It's not just mass shootings aren't just happening at schools.
Well, but the thing is, you don't become a mass shooting adult without having some issues in childhood. I mean, you just don't all of a sudden, you know. I mean, I guess you can just snap at 30 one day. And, you know, that movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas comes to mind.
I love that movie, by the way.
It's a great movie. But I think that if we're going to talk about, you know, places to start, that's not a bad place to start to raise better humans.
I mean, and there were mass shootings before 1999 that weren't at schools. Well, no, one was at school, University of Texas.
Well, it's true, but you see the point I'm trying to make, though, right? I hope
I do, and I think you've touched on something really good there. And one of the things that we had talked about, sort of in the group, a little bit, is that, you know, these shootings are almost universally, you know, carried out by white men, right? That there's, you know, and when we talk about things like mental health issues, it's like, it's not that there are mental health issues that only affect white men, right? Like, that's not how mental illness works. You know, it doesn't split down there. So there's something cultural going on there as well. That, I mean, I think, you know.
Oh, you're talking about that article I posted.
Yeah. With regards to the article you posted, I think it was a really good point. And one of the things that I think growing up as another angry white man, and what's been enculturated to me is that, you know, what we're shown in, you know, and this is not to just bag on the media, what we're shown in entertainment more than anything else is men put in situations of trial that they get to triumph over, and they oftentimes are using firearms. You know, they get to go out and they get to fight their enemies and they get to conquer. And the rest of and that's regular people in reality who and some of us, you know, have a more tenuous grasp on this than others, that we get kicked around by life a little bit. We, you know, when we feel impotent by comparison, you know, and by comparison to, you know, the kind of people that we look up to and idolize, you know, they're, you know, the big, strong alpha males, right? And the rest of us, you know, we're something less to a degree, oftentimes. And in the media, what we see, and not the media like the news media, but like in entertainment, we always see, you know, this person overcome and win. And oftentimes, you know, firearms are used as the equalizer, you know, that I use this and it's a win button. Like, if you, and in reality, if you own a gun and you want to kill somebody, all you have to do is decide to do it and someone's going to die, right? That's literally the only thing it takes. There's nothing holding you back but you in this situation. So when a person gets pushed far enough and they feel impotent and pushed around, and they want their chance to win, just like falling down, to go out and win, you know? And
well, David, let me ask you this. That's an interesting concept that you bring up. Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Do you think that, I don't know the answer, but are most of these mass shooting people, are they men that have feelings of impotence, or are they men that are truly just like want to hurt other, like, are they like, when you do study them psychologically, is it like the feeling of impotence, or is it the like just the not having like the part of their brain that says it's wrong to kill people that works? Like, what is it?
I think it's a combination of factors. I think honestly Melissa would be more qualified to answer this than I would.
Yeah, she's a psychologist.
I think that it would be a combination of both. But here's the thing, though. I think a lot of people can go around feeling with a feeling of incompetence, impotence. I'm not being recognized. But I think the reason why people go into that mode where they've got to get exact their revenge in such a dramatic fashion is because whether it's something they erroneously infer or if it's actually legitimately true, they're not getting their needs met psychologically to kind of, I guess, balance those feelings of neglect, of impotence, of being slighted or being underappreciated or basically just, beaten up by the world. We all have it within us to deal with those factors appropriately or inappropriately. And it's like that whole adage, it's whatever you feed. You're going to either feed the lion or the tiger, or you're going to feed, the lamb. Y'all know, maybe I'm not even saying it right, but how we choose to act on those feelings is whichever one we decide to feed. We can feed the aggressive animal. We can feed the meek
meaning like the type of animal is like the what type of person we are inside.
Kind of, yeah. It's a dance that we all have within us. We can all choose to be that Michael Douglas character in Falling Down, but it all comes from our chemicals reacting properly in our brain. We all have that limbic system. And for the most part, our limbic system works in communion with the rest of our brain to kind of keep our tempers under control so that we do not just automatically go all Timothy McVeigh, to harken back on the conversation last week. Oh, we all have, right. So we all have it within our capacities to be able to regulate how we choose to respond to those types of impulses. And I think that the people that do not, obviously, I mean, I'm not even saying something that you don't all know. I mean, mentally stable people don't go around gunning people down. It's just not something,
I
you don't
agree
do
completely.
that. So there's something that goes on in the psychos or the psychological makeup, our psychoses, our neuroses, our things are not firing properly. So I would think that, in certain situations, maybe if not all situations, these occurrences are people that are sociopaths. They don't have properly functioning mental, behavioral capacities. So I think that, it's just not one fact. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, I could sit here and talk all night, but
there are other factors too. And I think part of that is enculturated as part of almost an expected, not necessarily expected, but unintentionally reinforced as a male gender role is to be not necessarily sociopathic, but not really sort of anti-emotional and disconnected. And the boys don't cry, and you man up, and you overcome, and you become alpha, or you're not respected, right? And so I think that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it too is, yes, there have been mass shootings for in school shootings for over 100 years or whatever. Because if you really want to look it up,
I remember
it goes way back in Columbine, and I think Columbine is what kicked it off more than anything else, because it became popularized after that.
That was the first one that I remember.
Because there was all of those indie movies that came out afterwards, sort of.
Well, there was the Oklahoma City bombing, and then there was Columbine. Those were the two big bombs that I remember, and then 9/11, obviously.
Yeah.
Right.
And when did the Branch Davidian Waco shooting happen?
Oh, I was at Baylor during that. By the way, that was 1993.
Wow. Melissa, there was a guy that used to come into this bar that I bartended at, Sammy's, and he had he was the guy that there's a video of him getting shot on the roof of that.
Really?
Keith something. I just remember because I was but he was super cool, but he would always tell people that. And I was one day I was I don't believe you. And he showed me, and I was no fucking shit.
Yeah, it was crazy because I was working as a waiter and cocktail server in a steakhouse in Waco, and it was not uncommon for a dozen ATF officers to come in for a steak dinner on occasion. And it was and we're talking full flat gear, come in, eat, and go back out. It was insane. And my mother called me. She's like, "Oh my God, Melissa, what's going on?" I'm like, "I haven't joined a cult. I'm going to college. It's a totally different experience." But it was crazy times. It was crazy. And see, I didn't know anything about it because, no one ever talked about David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. I mean, that wasn't even anything that was on anybody's radar. So when it all came to a head, all of a sudden the ATF and the Branch Davidians were having this gunfight at the OK Corral. I mean,
with all the media there.
Yeah.
Burning themselves to death.
It was insane. It was crazy.
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
We had to do a mini, in law school trial, and that was one of the cases. Was the
really?
Wow.
Suing the media for tipping off the Branch Davidians, and that it's an actual case. They won a lot of money.
Wow.
Really? I didn't know.
But yeah, because like it's outside of Waco is the compound, and there had been like some helicopters and stuff going on for a few days, and then they like looked out. It's not really hilly there, but there's some hills, but they see like all of these like media white vans like start like driving up, like setting up video cameras. And then like a couple of hours later, the FBI rolls through. So they'd already all posted up. And that's why it lasted something like 52 days.
52 days.
Yeah. That's insane.
Yep, anyway. It was insane.
So guys, I guess to bring it back. So what do we think about dicks? I joked
earlier.
Oh
my gosh!
That dicks grew a pair. Do we feel like dicks grew a pair by banning what they called assault style guns from sale, which they had previously after Sandy Hook from like the regular stores, but they also have like Field and Stream branch of stores as well. And now they're I'm getting some major feedback.
Yeah.
Who's doing it? Who took out their headphones?
Lace did.
Lace.
That was a mistake.
Okay. I think we're back. I think we're okay. And yeah, they've been from the Field and Stream stores. So no, they're not selling it at all. They won't sell to anyone under the age of 21, and they no longer carry high capacity magazines, or as some people call them, clips. Because I'm just gonna anger all the pedants tonight. That's what I really wanted to come on and do, was just anger all the gun pedants. Because if you call it a clip and it's called a magazine, like, they apparently lose their shit about that, because they just go completely bananas, and they can't stand it. So I'm gonna call it a clip. So they so they're not gonna sell the high capacity clips anymore. And this isn't any law. This is just their policy as a store. So is this a potential free market solution to the problem of gun violence in America, or the problem of assault style mass shootings? Assault?
I think so. I think it's the beginning of it.
And they're not the only ones that what is it? There was
like
a rental car company. Was it Hertz? Yeah, go ahead.
So my thoughts on it are that the public is now kind of voicing its own opinion. And so I think that, right now we hear a lot of different voices out there. We hear the NRA's voice. We hear the people that shoot guns on a regular basis and are trying to defend being able to continue doing this voice. So finally, we hear corporate America's voice. And I think that that's a really important voice to listen to, because they're doing the cost benefit analysis, because they have auditors, they have accountants, they have investors, they have people that they owe, responsibility and duty, they owe themselves to. And so I think that gives me confidence to know that someone like a Dix grew a pair.
I love it. Yeah, and they're not the only ones, right? Because like I said, there was, that was it Hertz or something was distancing themselves, no longer providing, I guess, a discount to NRA members, and other companies are acting similarly. And Haley, you had brought up in the group about BlackRock, right? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
BlackRock is is the world's largest investment firm. It has a significant, a sizable amount of money invested in gun manufacturers and gun makers, and and there's a lot of reasons. BlackRock basically is a company you probably don't know about, but it controls a lot of, corporate decisions. It has a massive share in a lot of index funds, so it can definitely shape, corporate attitudes in individual industries. It has that kind of power. And it recently, I think it was on the 21st, February 21st, they announced that they're going to sit down with all of their gun maker, everyone that, invests, any companies that's a gun maker where they have investments in, and just ask them what they're going to do to positively contribute to society, basically, like what's their plan is. And, we've seen the response in the stock market with those shares, and we're seeing other companies starting to separate from gun manufacturers, and that all ties back to index funds, which are being, which is what BlackRock has control over, kind of. So, yeah, the more that they are able to separate, if gun manufacturers are going to do something, they're going to start losing Blackwater investments. They're going to be taken out of certain index funds with other companies, and they're just going to relatively quickly become a very unprofitable business.
Wow. I think that's, I was really surprised when I first heard about that myself, that like, how can they just do this? And two, why are they deciding to do it now? And it's like, maybe finally with these kids that we hit a critical mass, that it sort of went a bridge too far for whatever reason,
I think that BlackRock has just recently taken a more political stance. They're the ones who got Exxon to release the environmental impact studies about climate change. That was them. And that happened in 2016. I mean, they've been doing stuff, and so now they've moved on to gun control.
That would be really surprising, I guess, from the political lens through which I view, government and society, that we would see that basically like the shadowy financial group is going to be the ones that are going to be the force for positive. That it's Octopus Inc.
I have a thought on that.
Like, go ahead.
I have two thoughts, but they're kind of the same. I think that the two voices that I keep getting behind in the whole gun debate are, first and foremost, actually three, and I won't believe who number three is, but as you can probably guess. But first and foremost, the children that were there and like almost died and saw their friends die. I think that's like voice number one, and I'm so proud of them for getting out there and being brave and speaking their mind and becoming the face of this whole movement. But then separately, and secondly, I think that corporate America, who are the people that are like care about the Benjamins, the fact that they're making these decisions are, I think, secondly most inspiring. And then third, and I'm only including this person because I really think that this is just like a joke, but the fact that Trump said that shit to Pence tonight was really funny.
Yeah, it was a
due process
entertaining moment.
later.
Yeah.
I know.
Like, we'll make it legal later. I wonder if like Trey Gowdy had like a coronary when he heard that. But because yeah, it's insane. But I guess I don't know. I guess this is we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. In the midterms, we'll see what. Let's see if Marco Rubio is true to his. I'm trying not to laugh when I say it. If Marco Rubio will actually, but I got to give it to him. Like I do respect the fact that he showed up to that town hall. I think that took guts, and I think he's willing to move somewhat, and something is better than nothing. Still shameful that he was defending that he would still accept NRA money. I think people bought into my message. Yeah, if the Klan came to me and wanted to support me financially, I would tell them to go through, right? Yeah, no, I did too. It was was his worst moment. But really, I think otherwise it did kind of take a little bit of spine to show up there because he didn't have to.
I agree completely.
Trump didn't show up. The governor didn't show up, but he showed up, and I don't like him. I I definitely don't support him, but like, if he's going to do the right thing, even a little bit, I want to support that.
That's been my point the whole time, David, is that like, at least, he showed up.
Yeah.
So did Dana Loesch. I mean, I hate her, but I mean, she showed up.
Yeah.
But she doesn't get
credit
for that, for what she did the next day. That was
true. I mean, I agree.
Pretty disgusting. But
Ah.
I don't know. Anybody have final thoughts on that? Because then I'm going to soapbox briefly because I'm pissed off. About
you just wax poetically and let's crash.
Okay. So I'm just gonna read this. So like I said at the top of the show, that this guy, what's his name? The Republican Party chair, Tennessee Republican Party chairman Scott Golden. They did a press release. It was like official, like tngop.org. Basically, in this character assassination, because I can't call it anything else, of someone who I actually know and I've met and spoken with a few times. I actually just talked to her on Monday about all of this, but released on the 12th, this thing, calling Gayle Jordan, who's running for Tennessee State Senate in District 14, which I think hits like Marshall and Rutherford counties. I don't know the whole map exactly, but it's District 14. And she's also one of the people who's behind an organization called Recovering from Religion, right? And these are people who are sort of on the fence or they've left religion, and they're like basically like looking for a support group. It's like they've, are afraid to essentially come out of the closet. They don't know how to talk to their families about it. They're afraid of losing their jobs, and they just want someone to talk to. And that's what Recovering from Religion is about. But this is what the guy said about her. Gayle Jordan, darling of the Tennessee Democratic Party and the nominee for State Senate District 14, is what she herself calls a firebrand atheist. She isn't simply non-religious, but actively works to lead people away from their faith, which is a lie. It's her life's work as the executive director of an organization called Recovering from Religion. Saying Gayle Jordan's radical atheist views don't represent the values of Tennesseans across the state in District 14 is a gross understatement. She flat out attacks and rejects the fundamental social, moral, and religious beliefs of millions of Tennesseans. This type of extremism is being celebrated by the Tennessee Democratic Party and is very concerning. Today, I am asking if Democratic candidates for governor Carl Dean and Craig Fitzhugh support Gayle Jordan and a Democratic Party that proudly espouses extreme views. Candidates that shamelessly make statements such as "doing my part to destroy the fabric of America." This was a quote, okay? No. I'm going to get to that. Tennesseans deserve to know if the potential Democratic nominee for governor supports these radical views and will work to elect an anti-Christian extremist to the state legislature. This is not about being Republican or Democrat, rather an acknowledgement that her public attacks on Christianity and outward anger towards those that believe in God are a far cry from the views of Tennessee families across the state and in District 14. Okay, so I was hopping mad when I read this, right? Because it's pretty much, this is a Breitbart article, okay? This is a Breitbart editorial. That's really all this is. It's
an anti-Christian extremist, like, I wonder what that is.
Yeah. So I already explained RFR. It's not to deconvert people from Christianity. I do that. But it's a joke. I don't really do that. But Lace, you gotta mute yourself. Anyway, so and this quote, I want to get to this quote where she says, "Doing my part to destroy the fabric of America." I talked to her about this on Monday, okay? Where that quote came from was a Facebook post that she made facetiously after officiating a gay wedding, okay? Because she's a lawyer and she's a justice of the peace, and so she can do that, and she did. And then so she joked. It's like atheists joke about the baby eating thing, like, oh, to become an atheist, you got to eat a baby, then you get your card in the mail, right? And it was a joke in that vein. And this person, this Mr. Golden, just took it completely out of context. And the thing about firebrand atheists, someone who calls themselves a firebrand atheist is just someone who stands up for their rights, essentially, and will call out injustice and bigotry where they see it. That's what a firebrand atheist is. It is not someone who's trying to destroy Christianity or hates Christians or anything like that. But that's how they're going to spin it. So this thing was disgusting from top to bottom. And I doubt there's anybody here that's really going to push back on anything I'm saying. But just Tennessee GOP, you really ought to be embarrassed. What you did here was shameful. This guy Golden, he should step down because he's a joke. And those are my thoughts. That's my fermented opinion.
So, David, should I not invite you to my wedding validation in April in the Catholic Church?
No, I'm cool. We can go.
All right. All right.
He just might catch on fire whenever
I might. I want to try that, like Devil's Advocate, where he walks in and he touches his fingers in holy water and it starts to boil. But see, people hear things like this and they react to it. And it doesn't matter if it's not true, because it preys on people's fears that atheists are they hate Christians and they're trying to destroy America. And
reaffirms their biases.
Reaffirms the biases. The mind accepts uncritically that which it finds agreeable. And that's all this was. And in a way, it's backfired, because it tells me two things. And this is actually what Gayle said. And I'm hoping to get her on the podcast in an interview. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, because she's super busy. The election's in like 2 weeks. So she said two things. Is, first of all, like, this is a district that, like, I think the last couple of elections, like, went Republican by like 50 points. Okay. Complete landslide. As a joke to run as a Democrat in this district before. The fact that they need to do this might indicate something. And I think the polling, and I don't know it off the top of my head, kind of reflects that it's going to be a closer race this time. And I certainly hope it is. Hell, I hope she wins. She said herself that she was cautiously optimistic. I hope that's true. And even if not, I'm glad she's out there and she's trying. And the other thing is, she did a lot of fundraising that day. There's a lot of people who saw what this guy said. And Lacey, you got to go.
Yeah, David.
And I'm just wrapping up. But Lace, we'll see you.
Peace out, guys. Thanks for letting me hang out.
Cool.
Love ya.
Okay. And she did a lot of fundraising that day, so that ended up inadvertently helping her campaign. But I do see. I mean, it's disturbing that it's wrong. It's disturbing that it's bigoted. And honestly, I see when I go to the Democratic Party meetings, like there is this huge outcry that Democrats, they want to be recognized as Christians too. And so, and there's pushback against the idea that we're overly secular or overly atheistic, and that we're painted that way as a way to attack and denigrate us. And I am those things. So, like, I'm the object of that accusation. So I don't know. I got all kinds of feelings about it.
But she is not.
Well,
no, Gayle is an atheist. Yes.
Yeah, but she's not actively trying to make people not Christian. She's not trying to do any kind of attack on Christianity. That was just it's just spin, But if you had to rely on spin can get out of control. So,
and I hope it backfires. It would be a very happy day for me that it backfires. But we'll see. We'll see, because it's still Tennessee and it's still super red here, and like. And I'll say this is something I was telling somebody else, because I was making the rounds. Like a lot of times I go to Democratic Party meetings, and and they start with a prayer, and I sit there and go, really, guys? Like, I thought we're supposed to be the Big Tent party. Like, is this not? Am I at the Republican Party meeting? Like, I'm not sure sometimes by some of the conduct in there. And mostly that comes down to like whether or not the particular group of people are pro or anti-union. But that's not everybody. It's not everybody.
What a weird litmus test.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, and just say pretty much any Democratic candidate, especially in Tennessee, they're going to have like pretty much full backing of the unions, because they're going to support union policies, and things like healthcare and stuff like that, where people can kind of all get on board. But yeah, like they really push back against the idea that they're a bunch of filthy atheists. And I'm sitting there going, really? Okay.
Well,
but that's me.
Well, I wish her the best of luck. We're dealing with Ted Cruz over here, so
that's fun. Yeah, we've got a whole. Go ahead.
There's actually even a worse one. Is there's a woman named Kathleen Wall, and her ad goes like Trump, Wall. Trump, Wall, and then something like Trump, and then like Wall, and then and then she's like holding a Bible and a shotgun, and
Lovely.
yeah.
So, I mean, the campaign.
And it's not a joke. I showed it to Matisse, and I'm like, this is a real political ad.
It's simple. It's easy to remember. It's monosyllabic. Like, you know, very digestible, you know.
Yeah.
But I think some of us want to aim higher. And I believe there are people on both sides that want to aim quite a bit higher than that level of rhetoric.
Yeah.
And I want to see more of those people, and I want to talk to them. But that said, I don't have anything else. If either you have anything to chip in.
No.
I don't.
All good.
Good talk.
Yeah, definitely a good talk. I enjoyed it. I got to vent a little bit. That made me feel good. We got to talk about the shooting, which doesn't make anybody feel good. And, you know, we'll see what happens. I'm really encouraged by these kids. I hope they're better leaders than we've been. And with that, I guess we'll go ahead and sign off. People, we've had more viewers than we usually have. I'll just say it that way. And wave hi to Mom and Dad.
Bye, Mom and Dad.
And and you guys take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.
Bye.